Introducing YouTube memberships, a fun way to support the channel while getting some exclusive perks. Click the join button to become a member now and get benefits like badges next to your name on videos, behind-the-scenes photos, advantages during the live trivia game, discounts on merchandise, private one-on-one video chats, the ability to request future video topics, and exclusive 8 to 10 minute videos on the history of the NFL. And now, on with our feature presentation. How big of a deal is Monday Night Football? Well, based on all the videos I've done on the program and the history of it, I think it's safe to say that it's a pretty big deal. It's somewhat of a cultural institution at this point, as it's tough to imagine Mondays during the fall without the program. Monday Night Football draws massive ratings, and even if you are not a fan of football or a sports fan, it's tough to deny the pop culture impact that this program has had on America. From the fact that the country found out about the assassination of Beatle John Lennon from watching a Monday Night Football game in 1980 between the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins, to the countless number of movie trailers that premiere and celebrities that appear on the program, to the fact that the program has even had presidential candidates on it, Monday Night Football is a pretty big deal. Just how big of a deal is it? Well, here's a crazy story that you might not know about. It was such a big deal that it actually played a huge part in something that this man right here, President Gerald Ford, did. Seriously. In 1974, Gerald Ford had an all-important press conference at the White House regarding one of the biggest scandals in the history of the United States, and regarding his predecessor. And realizing that this press conference, which the entire country had eyes on, could interfere with Monday Night Football, he did something almost unthinkable. Because of the battle between football and the literal President of the United States, amazingly enough, football won. This is the story behind one of the craziest scheduling controversies in Monday Night Football history, and how the president took a backseat to the Monday Night phenomenon sweeping the nation. Before I talk about what exactly President Ford did, we need some context to understand the game in question, the importance of the game, and how the game itself was going. It's September 16th, 1974. It's the opening week of a brand new NFL season, and we've got an AFC battle on our hands over in New York at Richard Stadium between the Buffalo Bills and the Oakland Raiders. This game is a big one for a few reasons. Number one, it's the opening game of the season, and you always want to start the season off on the right foot. That should go without saying, but since the merger from 1970 to 73, of the 32 teams to make the playoffs, or 8 teams per year, a whopping 24 of them did not lose their first game of the season. Each year, 75% of the playoff field was composed of teams that got off to a hot start and did not lose their first game. So winning this game was a huge deal. Number two, it's Monday Night Football, and especially back in 1974, when that was the only way to play in front of a national television audience in the regular season, outside of a select few games like Thanksgiving, that was a big deal. You always want to look good, but especially in front of the entire country. And number three, both of these teams were expected to be good in 1974. So this was projected to be a pretty fun matchup, especially since both of these teams won 9 games the previous year in 1973. As for how this game turned out, well, this was one of the greatest Monday night games of all time, as to say that this was a classic would be putting it lightly. Outside of a tie, this is as close as a game can get, as it was decided by just one measly point. And it was the Buffalo Bills, in front of their home fans, who came out on top in this one, as when the final whistle sounded, Buffalo emerged victorious over Oakland by a final score of 21-20. It was an unbelievable game, with the Bills leading at 14-13 after 2 touchdown passes by Joe Ferguson, and with Buffalo having the ball with just 90 seconds left, a costly fumble on a handoff as the Bills were just trying to run out the clock that was returned all the way for a touchdown, gave Oakland a 20-14 lead. However, Buffalo drove right down the field, and Ferguson threw his 3rd touchdown pass of the day, with this one being a 13-yard strike to Ahmad Rashad with just 20 seconds left. As a side note, to learn more about Rashad, click the card in the upper right corner. And when the Raiders drove down the field and George Blanda missed wide right on a game-winning field goal attempt with no time left, it was official. The Bills pulled off a thrilling victory. For the fans that stayed up late to watch this one, since Monday Night Football started at 9 p.m. Eastern back then, they were treated well. I'll put it that way. However, despite the fact that this game was a big deal, it was far from the biggest thing taking place in America that day, even on American television. Far from it, in fact. Because that same night as this game was taking place, the 38th President of the United States, Gerald Ford, was holding an important press conference. I'm not going to dive too much into the weeds of this, because there are about a million different videos and documentaries on this already, but to make a long story short, Ford became the president after his predecessor, Richard Nixon, resigned due to the Watergate scandal. Ford took over as the president since he was the vice president, even though he was never elected vice president, and only got that position in the first place after Spiro Agnew resigned. It was a complex mess, but one of Ford's first actions as president, not even 1 month into his presidency, was to pardon Richard Nixon for any crimes he may have committed. On September 8, 1974, under Proclamation 4311, Ford issued the pardon, since if there was a trial, it would be a lengthy process that would divide the nation even more than it was already divided, would likely not be fair or impartial or speedy, and would expose President Nixon to further punishment when he already went through a lot. Half a century later, there is still debate about whether Ford should have pardoned Nixon, and whether this was a quid pro quo deal, where if you pardon me, I'll let you become the president. And again, I'm not going to get into that one bit, because there's plenty of history documentaries on that already. But it was a very divisive subject, to say the least. But I bring all of that up because he issued the pardon on September 8th. And 1 week later, on September 16th, he was going to hold his first press conference related to the pardon. The pardon itself was not very lengthy. It was only a few sentences long. But a press conference? A 30-minute press conference where reporters from all over the country gather in the White House and pick Ford's brain and wonder why he did this? We will learn a lot from this, especially since this was just his second news conference since assuming the presidency. And in the other one, he said that pardoning Nixon would be untimely and unwise. This was a monumental moment in American history, and a monumental moment in the early stages of the Ford presidency. This was going to be one of his defining moments, if not the defining moment. The only problem? This was supposed to take place at 9 p.m. Eastern, as in the same time that Nixon held his press conferences and held his televised meetings. This monumental event was taking place at the same time as this game right here, the Monday Night Football opener between the Buffalo Bills and the Oakland Raiders. And that was a problem for a few reasons. Aside from the fact that each of the networks would be televising the press conference, since its importance trumped the football game, and would mean that ABC would be in a pickle when it came to the game, especially since they can't just push the start time of Monday Night Football back 30 minutes, since it meant the game would be starting at 9:30 Eastern in Buffalo, and no one would be getting out of the stadium until sometime around 1 a.m. Simply put, this man right here, President Ford, loved football. Perhaps there was no president who loved football more than Ford did. Maybe Nixon has a case, seeing as him being so distraught about not being able to watch Washington play in the 1972 NFC Championship due to blackout rules was the impetus that led to the blackout rules getting changed in 1973. But Ford loved football. When he went to the University of Michigan, he was a two-time national champion and played a variety of positions on the team, with his number 48 jersey getting retired for a period of time by the Wolverines. He coached junior varsity football at Yale when he was a student at the law school in the late 30s. When the Pro Football Hall of Fame opened up in 1963, he was there at the ceremony, and he actually spoke at the ceremony in both 1967 and 1974. 1 week before he assumed the presidency, he spoke while the class of 1974 got inducted. I'm just trying to imagine George Bush or Joe Biden or any other president doing that, as they're, for all intents and purposes, the President of the United States. And he loved going to football games throughout his life. A few weeks later, he actually made plans to see the Monday Night Football game between Washington and Denver, although he had to later cancel them after his wife had surgery for a cancerous right breast. And after what was sure to be a brutal press conference, Ford wanted to do one thing, and one thing only: watch football. He wanted to unwind and watch some Monday Night Football and watch the battle between the Buffalo Bills and the Oakland Raiders. So instead of holding the press conference at 9 o'clock like Nixon usually did, he held his press conference 1 hour earlier, with the press conference starting at 8 o'clock. The television networks, especially ABC, were happy about this. And Ford was happy about this. He would take questions for 30 minutes, he would get out of the East Room by 8:30, and then, by the time he decompressed and unwinded, it would be 9 o'clock, and he'd be able to just watch ABC and watch the Raiders and Bills play. And this isn't speculation on my part that he moved his press conference because of a football game. A White House spokesman flat out confirmed that, and flat out said that the reason that this press conference was being held at 8 instead of 9 was because Ford was a football fan, and so that there would be no conflict whatsoever with Monday Night Football. It seems absolutely crazy to think about it, in the sense that in the battle between football and the president, that football would win. That never happens. In 2000, when the election results were officially confirmed, it came in the middle of a game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Diego Chargers, and CBS switched away from the game. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. In 1986, when Ronald Reagan held a press conference in Iceland after a summit meeting with Mikhail Gorbachev of the Soviet Union, that press conference directly interfered with the 4 o'clock games, and the networks cut away from the games. In 2012, when Barack Obama spoke following the tragedy at Sandy Hook, and that press conference was held during a Sunday Night Football game between the New England Patriots and the San Francisco 49ers, NBC showed that, and the game was moved to NBC Sports Network on a temporary basis. The president always wins. And yet, in 1974, Gerald Ford loved football so much that he didn't want to win the battle. He just wanted to watch football. And even with the biggest pardon by a president in the history of the United States, that didn't stop him. His press conference could get moved up an hour. The game could not be pushed back or moved up. And in his eyes, he knew what he had to do. He knew what he wanted to do. And he accommodated this as a result. Oddly enough, this is not the first time I've done a video about a television controversy involving a game between these two teams behind me in the Oakland Raiders and the Buffalo Bills. Back in 1969, when the two teams were still part of the American Football League, NBC was airing the game and decided to show the made-for-TV movie Heidi right after it. 1 year after the Raiders played the Jets, and we all know how that game ended with Heidi. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, unlike Heidi, where the movie won the battle and football lost the battle, this time, football won the battle. And football won the battle against the President of the United States. Quality win, if I do say so myself. That Monday night was an absolutely insane night of television if you were tuned into ABC. The night started with a rare press conference by President Ford regarding one of the biggest political scandals in United States history, and ended with maybe the greatest game in Monday Night Football history at the time. And to think that the neatness of the schedule, where viewers could watch the entirety of both things with no issue whatsoever, was all because the president loved football so much and wanted to watch this highly anticipated AFC battle unfold. Because on this day in 1974, all of our rowdy friends were truly ready for Monday night. Even the President of the United States. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.